If you're sitting in a chair, taking a break, and you know there's something you're supposed to be doing, especially about your business, a phone call you're not returning, some work that you left undone, some equipment you need to run across town and buy, some maintenance you need to do on your stuff, anything. If you're not doing that, you're never going to be successful in business. When it's time to jump, you're going to know it. You're just going to know it. How would you know? You would be frustrated. You would be a little bit unhappy. You would be maybe short of money. You would be in a situation where you're out of alignment. I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. I mean, who else would you do it for? Who else is there? I mean, yeah, you can modify and change your personality. You can modify and change your behavior. We all need that. But the core, that might be back to the tag on your toe.
Hey guys, welcome to Unlocking Potential. I just had an interview with Kevin Lee, the tree whisperer, where he speaks about his life, how he became the tree whisperer, how he got into learning about trees, how he stayed true to himself in creating his business, and how he had to adapt his business over time through different challenges, economic challenges, and then physical challenges. We also speak about life and philosophy and Buddhism and how that has impacted his life and his happiness. I hope you enjoy the podcast.
Yeah, and I see you got a lot of books in the background there, so you've learned a few things.
I've read some things, but it's mostly just insulation. It's a really good way to line the walls of a cabin.
So you work as an arborist, and you're known as the tree whisperer.
Yeah, we're still running on that one for sure.
Yeah.
Customer gave me that name.
Yeah.
Kind of comes from an old movie called The Horse Whisperer.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be all about, connection and love, as opposed to, breaking them down, Yeah.
When did you how did you end up being an arborist, and how did you end up knowing that was sort of your calling, and where did that all begin?
Yeah, well, that's when I look back on it, quite a few things in my life had happened where, after years of being an arborist, I could look back and say, well, I was already on the path many years before I even knew what an arborist was. I just had things happen in my life that came together to support that. In other words, some things happened where, you take a step, next step, and I can look back and see now that there was a series of steps that led to, where I got to, where I started from as an arborist. Some of that stuff goes as far back into my childhood as a kid that liked to be outside and climbing trees. And, that kept on for a long time, well into my teens. And then a life outdoors, mountaineering, backpacking, lots of serious hiking. And I took a job with the Forest Service, did a lot of tree work, mostly a little bit of pruning, but actually, cutting trees down, learning chainsaw skills. And that I also did that working up north, diamond drilling and stuff. And, we had to get a lot of wood. And, I was the helper, and that was my job. Go get a ton of wood and bring it back here. And after I'd worked for the forestry for about 4 years, I had a landscaping job because we used to work 10s and 4s. And I had a landscaping job on the 4s because I was like 25 or 24 years old and had a lot of energy. Yeah, just needed stuff to do all the time. So, I was working on trail crew. On my days off, I was working for a landscaper. And the landscaper had a buddy who ran a tree service, and he needed a guy. And so it all just kind of fit together. So, I worked on that crew for better part of a season. And at that point, you run out of work in the winter, and there's always a little layoff at that. And by the end of the season, I'd already started my own business. So yeah, in a sense, the old, I never looked back. So anyways, that's the short version. You don't want the long version.
Well, there's a couple interesting parts in there. So, because you mentioned you were like really active. So, how'd you do like in the classroom, in the classroom environment?
Was a kid in school?
Yeah.
That's called striking out.
So that must have like been, difficult, like having, not fitting in, having that self-doubt about, what am I going to do with my life?
Oh, I don't think I ever thought too much about that, to tell you the truth. Not until much later. But yeah, I was a hyperactive kid. That was before the ADHD term. I would have qualified for sure for ADHD, classification of my mental state, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always just needed a lot of action. And
Yeah.
there's no better action in this world than being an arborist and a professional tree climber. So, I just sailed into that. Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't really overthink it when it came to your career and stuff. You just started doing.
When I was in school back in the day, this would have been like 1974, maybe. Okay. And grade 8. And at that time, the school system, they had this pretty cool, like 100-question aptitude test that we all took one day. And it's like, would you rather work with your buddies in the backyard fixing an old car, or would you rather, watch fish in an aquarium or plant a plant or do anything else? And they're just trying to figure out, what you liked and where you might go. And it was interesting at 13 or 14 years old, the answer after all my 100 questions was, I'm going to be a forest ranger.
Nice.
So yeah, that was grade 8 before I knew anything about trees or work or, where things you could do in life. And I think all kids are dwarfed by some, hey, what you going to do with your life, and that starts sometimes way too early. I never really had the career path kind of thing. A bunch of guys I went to school with, they knew for sure they were going to be engineers. They just knew that. They knew that, early on. And their family had, very much pushed them. And I was very fortunate in the sense that my family didn't push me. There was always the idea that you'd go to university. And I never did go to university. But I did learn how to read. So if I wanted to learn something, I just get a hold of it. Yeah. So I did all these outdoor activities from the end of high school until 5 years later. I had done everything, working up north. I'd worked for the Forest Service. I'd done some farming. I'd done all kinds of stuff. And, all these things fell together. I loved that job out in the bush on trail crew. And then it led to the tree work. And yeah, I don't think I have a weird saying. And it's the old, we're in some detective show on TV and there's always a scene in the morgue and the guy's got the tag on his toe, right? It's like, yeah, okay, this is John Doe and this is what happened on such and such a date and all this kind of crap. I actually think that most of us, whether we know it or not, come into life with a tag on our toe, meaning that you have certain likes and dislikes, certain skills and certain things that you're really good at, other things that you don't really, that just doesn't do anything for you. And that's, I think, one of the most important things that young people should do is you should follow your YOUR, your interests, not your dad's, not your mom's, not your buddies. But I think we all have inside of us potentials. It doesn't have to necessarily lead to a finite point or a definite direction, but it might. And I think it's important to do that. I did this without even knowing I was doing it. I did all that outdoor work, and it ended up that I got that job as a tree guy, beginner, working arborist. And it was like, yeah, this is good. It fit. And so I don't know how I was directed in some of the things that I've said in the last few minutes about, where I did end up, because I ended up working in arboriculture for 42 years after that, from my mid 20s to well into my, mid 60s. And so I'm not going to claim any super smarts or anything here. I didn't have a direction. There was no arrow. I just followed my own nose, I guess. And I think for certain kinds of people, that's a good thing to do. Yeah. Don't let them put you in a box, man.
And your father was an engineer and an intellectual. So why didn't you try to follow his path and try to, people please him and go that way?
That's a good question. Later on, I did a ton of different reading just because I guess inside I felt that I needed the education that I'd never had. I mean, I never did go back to school, but in certain subjects, I learned them inside out and upside down. And, that's getting into the reading. And, that's what they do with you in university. They have you read stuff, and then they test your comprehension. If you have good comprehension, it's the same thing all the way from grade 1 to a PhD. When you present your thesis, thesis to the team that's going to jury you, it's the same thing. It's just a more sophisticated level of what's in this guy or what's in this girl's head anyways, right? So you can do that if you get the right material, and it's not hard to find really good books. You get the right material, you're chunking right along with those guys that are sitting there in those desks in the university. You can do that all on your own. There's no doubt about it. So back to my father, we were such different animals that it took me a long time to relate to him. He was a real straight guy, very conservative. It just had a plan in life, or I don't even know if he ever did, but he certainly seemed to have a connect the dots kind of life that moved him through, and as his abilities and skills changed and he grew, he'd had a lot of different kinds of jobs, but they were all very technical. So yeah, it took me a long time. I loved my dad, apart from the difficulties we'd had back when he had a hyperactive kid in his house. And, I think that most people really do naturally love their nuclear family. To me, there's something really wrong with that. You have to have some really bad stuff there to not love your family. And so I guess on one level, I just really wanted to relate to the guy. He was interesting. He was really smart. And I thought, well, I can do what he can do, I'm pretty sure. So, for example, he had wicked language skills and was a great writer and editor. And his real skills was as an editor. He understood so many things about the construction, syntax, usage, all of the just kaleidoscope of amazing different knowledge bases and skills that go into, being good with language. And so I started reading language stuff, history of the English language, prominent writers like Samuel Johnson, who wrote the first really good English dictionary. That goes back to about 1750. And my dad had studied all this stuff and was a real fan of Johnson's. Well, his writing was obscure and quirky and hard enough that it was challenging. I actually enjoyed reading books written by Samuel Johnson. And those are the sorts of things I did. And then I started reading about world history. And then I started reading about the Renaissance. And I'm still fascinated by the Renaissance. It's just an amazing time. Somehow I had amazing connection with language arts and language skills too. And I started relating everything to the usage of language in different types, different ways in society at different times. And it truly, what we have today, all the freedom in our life, this is unimaginable 400 or 500 years ago, 600 years ago. And it turns out on a really strong level that it was language skills that freed people from the tyranny of the Catholic Church and the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. So anyways, that's just an aside, but there's just a lot of amazing stuff about language. So as I got the bug and really got interested in that and started studying it a lot, I could relate more and more to my dad. Then I read a ton of English literature and classic poetry. Everybody from, you name it, Samuel Pepys' diary to Alexander Pope, his translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey, on and on and on and on and on, right? All the way up to Browning and the poets of the Victorian age. And I read a little bit about all of those guys, and I still have, well, that's what all this insulation on the walls about here. Yeah. And so my dad was always interested in literature too. So that gave me another thing to relate to him. So all of a sudden, anytime we showed up in any situation, family barbecue, social situation, or anything, we would always just end up, we kind of started a conversation 30 years ago, and it's like knowing somebody that well and their interests. And so we never ran out of anything ever to talk about. We always had lots to talk about. It's just different things would come up about all of that vast study of literature and language. And it's big. No one can get around that whole thing. It's huge. So
you read a lot. You've read a lot about philosophy and literature and even Zen Buddhism. So what have you learned from that?
One of the most important things, I think young people get kind of sucked into philosophy. There's an amazing thing. And I think a lot of people think that if you study philosophy, you get right down to the marrow. I mean, this is it. This is the thing itself. And that's not true. Some philosophy is close. It gets pretty close. But what you're doing when you're reading philosophy is you are reading one specific man's ideas. He didn't talk to other people a lot. There's no sort of overview or umbrella there. They would take a subject, like one of the major subjects is epistemology, okay? So this is the nature of knowledge. How do we prove that we know what we know? And that in today's world gets very, very technical and really nice, I want to say cute little arguments and stuff that you try and put an argument in a box and make sure that nobody can pick it away or pick a thread out of it. To me, that's not the pursuit of knowledge or truth. That this is more of a method study. So a lot of modern philosophies like that, and a lot of ancient philosophy is just a man's life, his thoughts, his opinions. There is tons of good stuff, don't get me wrong, but it is not the word of God. It is just the word of another man. And sometimes they were a little bit extreme. One of the most famous philosophers critiqued in the modern age is a guy called Descartes. And he was a French philosopher, approximately about 1600. And Descartes got into big trouble because he's sort of cited as the father of dualism in our society. Dualism can be really bad because he separated mind and body and did a lot of weird and sometimes cruel experiments on animals. And he came up with the great I think therefore I am, right? And but at the core of that is dualism. And there's a lot of problems with that because what dualism does is separates us from the world itself. It creates a sort of different self, a different mindset, a different I as a separate being, as opposed to you, as opposed to this tree, as opposed to the starry night, whatever's going on. Buddhism and a lot of connected thinking, and there's many schools, You don't have to take Buddhism. You don't have to take DeMartini. You don't have to take any of these things. But these are the schools that try to have you reduce dualism rather than grow it in your mind. They are trying to help you connect. Realize that, there is a whole continuity running through this universe, through our lives, through our days, and seeing ourselves as a separate unit that can be insulted very easily or angered very easily or pleasured very easily. Those are, in a sense, weaknesses. If you're like that a lot, and I was like that a lot back when I was young, you get into trouble a lot. If it's really easy to insult you, you need to work on that. You need to realize that the world is not here just to insult old Kev or whoever you are or what's going on. You build these situations from the things you see. Events come together that just, it's not reality. It's just causes and conditions come together. And if you react to them, you're missing the point. You're missing the point that you can just observe this rather than taking it personally, back to the dualism thing. And you can just let that flow. If you don't have that, any kind of the place to start, honestly, is just knowing this stuff. You can spend your life, all searchers, all wise people will study and think and learn and grow and try and become a better human being with less dualism in their life and more, connection, let's say. And so I think the most important place to stay, and a lot of us never get beyond this. I don't think I have got beyond, but I'm now aware of it. I'm kind of watching myself, and I know that, it's a mistake to think that driver doesn't hate your guts. That driver is not out to ruin your day. You had to slam on the brakes or else you guys would have had a car accident. He's having a bad day. He's distracted. He doesn't care. You just happened by chance to be there. Maybe that chance was a lesson that you either picked up or maybe you missed it. So
let's go back to where you were on your path to, doing lots of different activities and just sort of taking action and trying things out. And then you eventually decided to start a business. So there are people out there who want to start a business, but it never happens, or they get stuck in their head. So how did it come so naturally to you, and kind of maybe describe that process?
That's actually pretty simple. If you're sitting in a chair, taking a break, and there's something you're supposed to be doing, especially about your business, a phone call you're not returning, some work that you left undone, some equipment you need to run across town and buy, some maintenance you need to do on your stuff, anything. If you're not doing that, you're never going to be successful in business. You got to give her. That's all there is to it. And most businesses, some of the most famous businesses in the world started as garage bands. A lot of breweries and guys that just did stuff, plumbing company, furnace and repairman, tree service, you name it, musician, but you got to keep playing your guitar. And, in the tree service, that's just some of the other things I mentioned. If there's work to be done, you do it. And it's very important to do that. One of the most important thing that happens right away is you can't do business unless you can talk to people. And those people, not only do you have to talk to them, but you have to listen to them and you have to give them what they want, because they're the boss, they're the client, and you're supplying a service, whether it's playing guitar for 2 hours up on a stage, climbing a big elm tree, painting their bathroom, they're in charge. If they're not happy, maybe you won't even get paid. So you have to listen to these people, pay attention to what they want, give them what they want, do a good job, use your professional standards, argue with them so that they understand why you want to do it the way that you think you should do it, rather than you probably know more about your business than they do. So I spent half my life teaching people about trees so I could work on their trees in a way that worked for me. In other words, really kind to trees. And so, yeah, that's just a huge other part of it. You got to be people pleaser is sort of kind of sounds bootlicking. You don't have to be that kind of person. You have to let them know that, they will test you and ask you questions. They want to know that you know your stuff. They will, a lot of people know something really good. It tends to be what they do in their work, in their life, in their job. They don't know a lot about what you do. Again, maybe it's a tree thing. So, they've heard a few things. The neighbor did this, blah, blah, blah. They think they have an idea. They're pretty sure they do, because we all need that. It's just people come to the marketplace with that kind of confidence. It's your job to give them the truth, give them your slant on the truth, tell them why you're giving them your slant, as opposed to, I don't work like those guys, because they're really hard on trees. And so always do your work that needs to be done. If it backs up, that's fine. If they phone you and say, where are you? You say, you apologize, and you get there as soon as you can. And always work on your people pleasing. And again, not a bootlicking term, but you cannot run a business with unhappy clients. That's just all there is to it. So. Yeah.
How did you get your first few clients, or how did you get things rolling in the beginning?
I think a lot of people use their existing community. And for many years, for nearly 30 years, I did a little bit of advertising here and there, but different places you'd think might be valid, or maybe you'd put a little ad in the Yellow Pages, if anybody still remembers what the Yellow Pages was. But, the best way to build a business is word of mouth. So you worked for Mr. Jones, and he's really happy with how it went. Well, all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're working for his neighbors. And then you're working for the neighbor's son. And then you're working for the neighbor's son's neighbor. And then you go across town and work for his cousin. And this just network naturally builds like this. People, for all of the different endless advertising techniques through all the age of television and just now into the internet and all of it, a lot of people find that a bit intimidating, and they don't really know it. You know what people like to do? When they say, say you're even doing something simple like buying a set of tires. Well, your neighbor's a car guy. He knows a lot more about tires than you do. So you hit him up on the street. You're both shoveling the snow. You go, I need some new set of boots on that old car of mine. Where should I go? What should I get? And that's word of mouth right there. He says, oh, you got to go to Mike's tire shop. It's just 2 blocks from here. The guy's great. I've had 5 or 6 sets of tires from him. Always had a good deal, good run. And so that's what I did. I built my business on word of mouth. And the only thing that actually changed that was nearly 30 years later, when everybody was starting to get on the net and get websites. And so I was a little slow to do that. There had been tree services in town that had websites maybe not quite 10 years before me, but, quite early. And I just was such a low tech guy that I had no idea how to even approach that. But a couple of things came together. We had some sort of miniature recession and economic downturn in Calgary, coupled with, the growth of the internet. This would have been sort of from like 2010 to 2016, 17. I mean, today in 2026, tree services on the internet and websites in Calgary number in the hundreds. So I've watched all these new guys come on, which is great, because, that's what you need to do if you want to start a business. The Yellow Pages of old is now even more exciting and dynamic, and we call that having a website on the internet. But some things came together, some economic downturn in Calgary, and some, the internet was growing and stuff. And I got to a point where it's like I'm scratching my head. I've tried my best to always take care of people and make them happy. And I was not actually getting enough work anymore. And I knew at that point that I had to go on the net. And after some initial wrong turns and some problems and some wasted money and a couple of attempts at websites that weren't really successful, I ended up with a team of, couple of guys that are a whole lot more computer and technological savvy, have a lot more of that than I do. And I stuck with those guys, and it worked out really well. One of them was had done a lot of homework and really understood the internet, Google, and marketing. The other one was just a serious geek. He had built computers as a teenager and was very, very savvy with the internet and how to make computers do things, how to install software on websites, all of these sorts of things. And so the combination of working with those two guys through all those years, I ended up having a pretty big, fat, and successful website, actually. And so again, it was, there's an old saying goes, needs must. This has to be done right now. I mean, we got a hole in the roof and there's a storm coming. We better do something this afternoon. Needs must. So I was surprised when my word of mouth business started to fail me, but the economic downturn spoke of it, and then the really strong growth of the internet that I knew nothing about. And it was time to make the next jump. And I did that. I grabbed a hold of it with both hands. And as I said, I ran into a couple really smart key guys that, supplied the technology. I was the creative one. I paid them for their work, and I came up with ideas, and we tried all these different things, and it was a winning combination. So all on a very small scale, but it was enough for me.
There was another event or time in your life where you had to adapt your business, where you kind of went from pruning and all of the physical work, and now there was a time where you wanted to transition to consulting. So how did you even make that happen? How does someone just go from doing something really tangible to now I'm just gonna consult? And
a little more abstract,
right?
Yeah. Well, that I think you got something there. I think that was another time to find a new lily pad, right? Froggy's got to jump. and life takes you through those steps. There's nothing you can do to avoid that. You should welcome them. When it's time to jump, you're going to know it. You're just going to know it. How would you know? You would be frustrated. You would be a little bit unhappy. You would be maybe short of money. You would be in a situation where you're out of alignment. Again, we're supposed to stay in alignment with the universe, and that's a subject that I don't know much about. But if you have trouble in your life, you're out of alignment.
So these frustrations are kind of like signals coming at you, like something to pay attention to. Things time to change.
I think so. Froggy's got to jump. And so, one of the strongest parts of the idea of leaving the actual physical, physically doing tree work behind, or at least, doing less and less of that, was that I was aging. And I took my trade as about as far and as long as I could. And I worked physically still as a tree worker. Those trees weren't as big as they were when I was in my 30s, but I continued working physically until I was 58 years old. I loved my job and I loved the tree work. And as long as I was still pretty good at it, there was no way I was going to do anything else. It was that good of a fit. I was very, very lucky with that tag on my toe. But, there's no way you can stop time zero. The wheel turns. And, another thing that had happened about that time was the idea that I wanted to, you learn a lot. If you do something a lot and you read about it a bunch, you're going to accumulate knowledge through the years. And I wanted to write a tree book. And I did do that. It was kind of right at the start of COVID. That's my joke. It was my COVID project. Yeah. And one of the most amazing thing about writing that book was it's like I got through and I'm pretty happy with the book, and it's very, very helpful to a homeowner. But what I did when I was working on the material for that book is I realized I had what I considered a lot of like big burning holes in my knowledge. It's like, okay, I can talk a good game here, but do I really understand what happens in the tree when this event occurs or whatever it was, right? And so it was at that point where I decided it was time to take my reading and language skills and apply them to studying botany. And this all came together at about the same time when I started running my consulting business. And so right up until today, in the last 6 or 7 years of the consulting business, I've always continued reading and studying. And honestly, the knowledge that I gained from my several hard winters of really putting in the hard time in the botany textbooks, basically university textbooks is what they are. And again, you don't have to sit in their chair; you can sit in your chair, and it worked for me. And the knowledge that I have now compared to when I wrote the book it's much greater, much deeper and wider. And one of the strongest benefits of doing this was just knowing that I had very few holes in my jigsaw puzzle. This is a metaphor that I'm using, thinking of the whole knowledge base that you could have about whatever it is that you're good at in this world. How many holes are in your puzzle there? And back when I wrote the book, there was a bunch of holes. And now there's not very many. And it was just a really good thing. I thought if I was going to offer, people were going to pay me to come and talk, and I was going to have a good look at their property and have a good look at their trees and tell them in what direction would be the best for them, what's best for your trees, what's best for you, and, to just deal with this on a very useful level. All of that extra knowledge is very few people ask me those kinds of questions. But I've learned how to take that intricate and sometimes very complicated and technical vocabulary. I've learned how to turn that into just sort of street talk. And so they get it without me having to get all technical on them and get into negative water pressure or whatever was going on there to move some fluids through certain tissue in a certain part of a tree. And most people don't want that. Once in a while, I ran into a dad. His daughter had been studying botany, and he had got into that with her. And so he could ask some pretty technical questions, and it was great. And he was just nodding and grinning because I was going, yeah, okay, well, you're right, and this is how it works. And you got that pretty good. And so that was a consult that went very well. I've had very few of those, but the knowledge is never wasted. That's for sure. And it's like the average tree guy is a doctor that doesn't really know how your body works. He knows how to sell you stuff. He knows that you've been set up by the great North American marketing machine to buy the product, but he can't really tell you how the body works. I don't like that idea that my doctor doesn't know how my body works. I'm the kind of doctor that knows how your body works. And specifically, what I'm saying, I know how the tree's body works. So people get into different thinking, wrong thinking sometimes, very commercial, very focused on the buck. And they're not really, hitting it square or straight or solid. They're more focused on the sales, less focused on the body of the tree, what's going on with it, and how it works. Many of their customers don't really want to get into that. So, the commercial tree service does really well. I work for people that have questions. That's my little market niche, is people that don't buy all that marketing. So anyhow.
So what's next with the tree business? Because I know you've started a YouTube channel. So what else what's happening going forward?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I had, again, some really good technical and professional help with that. Again, same two people. The man who had all the marketing skills also turned out to be an excellent editor. and could, operate and deal very well with YouTube's requirements. And so after doing all the writing, because if you language skills is everything. Everything I do seems to connect to language skills. So what do I mean by that? If you do all this reading on whatever it is that you love, and you should love it, it's in your head. You got to think that through. You have to spend as much time digesting and thinking about what you've read as you do reading, sometimes more. Sometimes you need to read it 5 times and think about it a little bit different each time. Did you finally actually get this concept? I had a really rewarding experience where I had made a connection that I had never read about. When I got into more advanced books, they spoke plainly and explained the connection of how 2 different tissue groups related. But from my early reading, I went deep enough with it and thought enough about it that I knew that this connection had to exist, even though I had never actually read it in print. I hadn't read difficult enough books. That kind of idea was for a bit more of an advanced study. And so that made me really happy. That was one of the strongest things I ever did. It's a very simple process. Yeah, right. But anyways, it was just a super rewarding thing. But so what I mean to say here is, cut to the chase, is that if it's in your head and it's really in your head and you really know it, then you can write it. You should be able to write it really well. And I'll tell you, it's one of the best mental exercises you can do. Creating good sentences, paragraphs with continuity, and a series of those in page after page of knowledge that flows well, has flow is a good word. It needs to move in complexity and in time. If you're describing how a tissue changes or something else in life changes, it has to, you start at the beginning, you go through the middle. Well, we know where we're going here. And so that's what I did initially. I loaded my website with a whole series of technical essays that I'd learned from all of the different subjects of the several winters of hard botany study. The next thing I thought I should do, I wanted to make another move, and I wanted to say, hi, Google, I'm still alive, and I wanted to improve my website again, was, well, why don't I just talk about this stuff? Because again, if you really know it, then you should be able to, string some sentences together and come up with a line and tell people kind of a story, because it's always a story. And we love a good story, especially if it's a subject that we like. And so what I did was I used my essays now as my ground material, because they were pretty solid and just a notch down from the technical botany books, but they were more readable. Okay, because they were in Kevinese. They were in, I had translated these difficult botany texts. I kept a lot of the strict, stringent vocabulary, but I had smoothed it out, more of a storyline. So I used those essays, I reread them a bunch of times, and then I made, if the essay was 3 pages of printed text on any specific aspect of the life of trees, I would read them, and then I would make notes with like 20 or 25 or whatever, something like that, key subjects. And if you ever watched a YouTube video of mine, you notice I'm looking down all the time. I can speak for quite a while sometimes on that one key word. And all I did was put them in the proper order, again, complexity and time. And then I put them on a piece of paper and I turned on the camera and I started talking, and I went from word to word to word to word, connecting and filling in all of the details about that subject. So that was a lot of fun. And so I took 10 major subjects that I had written on. I have written on more than 10, but 10 was enough. I wanted to really just get this to the core. And so I did 10 of these YouTube videos on these different channels. And again, that's how I did it. I just used keywords. I'd move from one to the next. And each one of them brought up a whole series of ideas, just like I'm doing right now. And that's how I did the YouTube channel. So that's been since last December. And yeah, I think we're seeing some results from Google already. You got to work hard. You got to keep Google happy. Google is the kind of mistress that likes presents all the time. Bring me something nice. Do something for me. There's nothing wrong with this relationship because it's the way it is, and there's nothing we could do to change it. And you got to play baseball by the rules, and you got to play Google by their rules. And so that's what I was doing, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And it really helped with my. Well, first I did the reading, then I did the writing, and then I did the speaking, and so it really helped with my speaking skills too. So yeah, there you go.
Cool. So yeah, so what I've kind of gotten so far is that, you know, you've been a lifelong learner your whole life, whether not necessarily always through books, but sometimes just through taking action. And you've been a person of action who you didn't get stuck in your head. You did things, you put yourself out there, you did the work, you did those tasks. And that seems to have really served you.
Yeah. I mean, we have to work. That's all there is to it. You have to work. And so the more that you can relate to what you're doing for your work, and if it ends up being your own business, then you couldn't be more self-interested in it. You are going to want to know, need to be an expert. You want to be an expert. You need to know the material, and you're going to enjoy it in different modes. Like I've spoke, of reading, writing, speaking, and always relating to people. It's people. It's all the time. It's people. Like you said, don't get stuck in your head. How many people are in your head? Well, I'm multiple personality disorder. I've so far met 15 of them, but that's not enough to carry you through life. You need a whole lot more people than 15. And so they're out there, not in there. And so, yeah, that's where we got to go, right?
And it also sounds like you really stayed true to yourself right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, you knew what was the right thing for you to do, that was the right work for Kevin.
I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. I mean, who else would you do it for? Who else is there? I mean, you can modify and change your personality. You can modify and change your behavior. We all need that. But the core, that might be back to the tag on your toe. You're kind of who you are. You might get softer, sweeter, better, smarter, more polite. Who knows? Maybe we all need some of that. But, who you are is very little of that changes, I think.
Yeah.
Even through some very serious encounters or very strong experiences that you can sometimes run into. Yeah. That's a good thing. That's okay. I mean, it's part of human consciousness. There's a lot of babble about, I don't know, just, look, the Dalai Lama has a self and an ego, and he knows it, and every other Buddhist monk in the world knows it, and all smart people know it. But he's a guy that has worked very, very hard through a long, long life to try and connect as much as possible. I've never met the man or been in any of his seminars or talks or anything. I mean, he's like the Buddhist rock star, right? He comes to Calgary, he fills the Saddle Dome. People just want to touch him and get close to him. And understand, if you're in a room with him, the energy in that room is amazing. This is a guy who has taken himself and his ego down to pretty much a minimum. I don't know this for sure, but it's my impression. Lots of books that I've read speak of him quite a bit. I do have books of his, actually, but he's not my favorite writer, but that's my problem. But this is a guy that has reduced his self and his ego to the minimum amount, and you cannot eradicate it. The whole concept, I think it's almost like a lie in especially in Buddhism, is the fact that we're all going to attain enlightenment and then nirvana and stay in this, I don't know, dream place or something. That is just not possible. It's good to experience that state. I've experienced very little of that in my life. I have had some interesting experiences that way. But where we stay is here in what Buddhists call conventional reality. Okay. And But yeah, the Dalai Lama, I understand that his ego is minimal. His dualism is as minimal as probably possible. His connectivity and universality is as great as possible. And so he looks at you and loves you and cares for you and would like to make your life better. That's what Buddhists call a bodhisattva. All loving people have that. You don't have to be a Buddhist. Mother Teresa, pick any example you want, Gandhi, anyone who has definitely denied themselves and put themselves out for the people and done something to change the world or make their society better or just to feed children or anything, that takes a distinct lack of self and a lot of universality. Connectedness. So anyways, yeah, walking along the edge of my knowledge base there.
Yeah, no, but it sounds like the main message is to just strive to be as loving as you possibly can.
It's amazing. You pick up a sandwich at a convenience store because you're in a hurry. And, it feels like the world's all on me today and I'm behind and I tried to get some money from some people that owed it to me and I'm late for another job and I got to settle for a quick lunch on the go. But if you look at that sandwich, like let's just take the bread, okay? The bread is not just bread. Bread doesn't just fall out of the sky. You know how many people worked hard to make that bread and put it together in that sandwich? Same thing. Is it a ham sandwich? Well, a pig had to die for you to have that sandwich. Same with the mustard seeds. Same with the leaf of lettuce. And by the way, every time it was changed, moved, cleaned, washed, changed, adapted in any way, there was human hands there, like the people that sew your clothes, the people that grew the cotton, the people that cleaned it, the people that made thread out of it, the people that then wove it, then they cut it up into pieces, sewed it together. That shirt fits pretty good. All these loving hands went into you having a shirt and a ham sandwich on you running away, thinking the whole world's after you and you're having a bad day. It's all connected. There is no possible way that we can live in this world without all the love and input of so many strangers' loving hands. This is the true basis of how this planet works. Yeah. Anyways,
this sort of us versus them mentality.
Mm-hmm. You know what?
Kind of a recipe for disaster in a way in your own life.
Simple thing like driving in traffic. I understand down in Dallas, Fort Worth, that there's 40 or 50 fatal shootings on the freeway system in that giant city every year. This is road rage taken to its Texas final point. Okay. Guy gets cut off or sideswiped or some driver is just, not living up to his standards. And they shoot them. They kill each other on that freeway all the time. I've tried a lot of different things because I used to take my driving way too seriously too, and my place, and no one's getting ahead of me. And Calgary's a famous city for, you just watch how many people won't let you in. So my reaction to that is, well, I like to let people in. But one thing that's pretty cool about drivers, because there's something really cool. Driving is like nothing else. You can have really great experiences in the Safeway aisles too with strangers. But I found that yielding or even just not being so selfish on the road and just doing a little eye contact and a little wave once in a while, and it's amazing. People will wave back. And all of a sudden you destroyed that whole us against the whole world concept, and me, and I got to get 2 cars ahead of this guy, and this whole, and we see that all day long. A lot of people do drive like, and yeah, it's pretty cool,
That goes back to the, interconnection that you were talking about before, how we're kind of, recognizing how we're interconnected and how we need each other in a way.
I can't prove it. I don't know it for sure, but I honestly feel that on some level, we're all soul brother sisters. We don't really know what we are. We don't really know where we come from, but, look at those loving eyes or look at those hateful eyes. Which one do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you want to be? Brings up a really great subject. This is all talk and no action.
Mm-hmm.
And reading can really take you down the river, and you can get a head full of theory. But what's more important than that is to be the thing that you think you want to be. A famous line goes like this: be the change, right? But yeah, it's one thing to have a head full of stuff, and it's a whole different thing to be that. And that's harder to do because you have to now put yourself on the back seat and instinctively put other people in the front seat. And in other words, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be fine. Don't quit work. Don't, make any weird jumps. But yeah, that's where I'm at my life is, I spent enough time with enough theory. I'm trying to live this thing. I have a saying that I say all day long now. And it's like, I am trying to recognize my innate Buddha nature, which is another way of saying we're all brother, soul, sister together. I'm doing this and I'm thinking, every moment. And it sounds funny and like I'm repeating myself, but those were 3 distinct pauses, and that's how our brains work. You need to blink, you need to breathe, and you need to just stay in base. This isn't as bad as I imagined. What's actually going on here? Be more observant, more aware, and yeah, every moment. And that's about as far as I've gone in this life. I'm no master of anything. I can do pretty good on the trees, but
That's great. So before we close, is there any other last message that you'd like to share with any young people who may be watching, or non-young people, but I think mainly it'll be people in their 20s and 30s. And
young at heart, young in soul.
Young at heart, that's right.
Yeah. Don't fool yourself with your feelings. That is really easily done. And I'm supposed to be really sad right now, or I'm supposed to be really angry right now, or don't let anybody tell you how to feel or think. If you're angry, blow it off, get out of there. Don't get it in someone's face. Go outside and scream like John Lennon did. Do whatever you need to do. Emotions are more of a physical experience. Typically, they're like a wave. Comes and goes. Honestly, if you breathe through it, that emotion will disappear in less than a minute, no matter what it was. So yeah, this is some things that Doug was always saying about being true to yourself. Don't play games with yourself. That's another level of duality. If I'm feeling really happy, well, yahoo, that's great. Enjoy it. You can't be happy all the time. This is part of our experience in life. To know happiness, you need to know sadness. To know the gravy days, you have to remember when you could barely pay the rent. On and on and on and on. There's just this amazing relationship with all of the extremes of positive and negative in everything in life. And just try and be honest to yourself. How are you feeling? How are you doing? If you're not feeling good, maybe you're pretty sure you need to change something. You might want to think about what that is. Well, my girlfriend and I aren't talking, and well, I kind of hung up on her, I guess. And I actually really like her. She's a good person. Maybe we might even have a future. Who knows? Oh, well, I better talk to her, right? Be humble, a little less self, a little more her. Nice. Start over. Anyways.
Right on.